C closer here. Friends call me Vic. I got another Vic C Stories and Tall Tales. Seems like I've been telling a lot of woofer stories lately. I'm going to do another woofer story, kind of. Back when we were in the Philippines in 1987, back in those days, Woofer wore cowboy boots all the time. And he had a pretty cool pair of boots. If you ever saw the movie Urban Cowboy, there was John Travolta was wearing this pair of boots, and they were a very light tan color, almost had a yellowish color to them, and they had little wingtips on the toes, and they were brown. I think Tony Lama had made those boots originally, and it was a pretty popular style. Woofer had a pair of those, and I remember one time, and this is a kind of a side story about the boots, but we went to Kmart one time down in, I think it was Chula Vista area, and we went in there, and back then, those days, you go to Kmart and buy cowboy boots, and Woofer's, said he needed a new pair. His were getting pretty wore out and everything, and so we went into Kmart, and I couldn't find any that fit me, but he went in there and he found another pair exactly like the ones he had on, same color and everything. They were just brand new, and he bought them there at Kmart. And I swear it seemed like he only paid $30, $40 for them at the most. I don't remember exactly. He might have paid a little more, but it was pretty reasonable. And I was kind of disappointed I couldn't find a pair. Well, fast forward a little bit. Me and Woofer are over in the Philippines, and me and him, when we were both off, we would go out in town and prowl around together, and we got, had a lot of adventures together over in the Philippines, obviously. But one day we went into town kind of early. I guess it was on the weekend. We were off all day. So we went into town kind of early, and there was a boot store. And we went in there to look around, and they had all these boots on display. And they had everything you could think of. I mean, they had snake skin, they had alligator, they had iguana skin, they had, different leathers, they had different lizards. They just had all these things, and there was all these colors, and some of these colors I'd never seen on boots before. And we were just like, wow, And so we were talking to the girls that were working in there and stuff, and they were like, yeah, I said, well, what all sizes in these do you have? And they said, oh, no, we don't stock them. These are just the display models. She says, we make them for you. I said, oh, you make them? She says, yeah, we'll measure your feet, and we'll custom make these boots for you. So you pick out, what hides you want, and, what heel you want, and, what uppers you want, on the shafts, what kind of material and everything, and what kind of stitching you want on it, and all that kind of stuff. And you pick out what kind of soles you want, just all these things. You have all these options. And he says, and then we'll make them for you, tell you when they'll be ready, and then you come back and get them. And I was like, well, how long does this take? And he said 3 days. I said, 3 days? They said, yeah, they'll be ready in 3 days. If you order them today, we'll have them ready in 3 days. And I was like, well, how much do these things cost, And she was like, well, it kind of depends on what you get, And I said, well, she goes, you got something you like? So I looked around, and Woofer was looking around, And so I'm like, well, I like this over here. What is this? She said, oh, that's iguana skin. I said, well, that's kind of unique. I said, I don't see a lot of people wearing boots like that. And I said, I like that. She goes, well, okay, we can make you some iguana skin boots. She said, what kind of tops do you want on them? And I said, I'd like to have blue leather. And she said, we got blue leather. We could do blue. Which blue you want? And she showed me these different color blues, And so I picked one out. And said, what kind of stitching you want on that? And I picked out the stitching pattern, And I said, yeah, I'll take this. And she said, what kind of heel you want? What kind, toe and everything. And I said, well, I want, the regular cowboy toe, and I want the cowboy heel, that kind of slopes back, and everything. I want the cowboy heel and everything. And I forgot the height and everything, but I got a little bit of heel on it. And so they said, okay. So they started measuring my feet and everything, and she's writing all this stuff down. And I said, well, wait a minute now, how much is that going to cost me? and she was like, $42 American. I said, $42? She said, yep. So you pay in US dollars, $42 American. And I'm like, that's a deal. She said, but you got to pay in advance, And I said, okay, I paid. I paid, and then Woofer got him a pair too. It cost him about the same amount of money. I forgot what kind Woofer got, but he got a pair too. And so we ordered them, and then we left. And 3 days later, we went back in and we picked them up, and we put them things on, and they fit perfectly. They fit perfectly. And I remember I wore those things all around the Philippines and everything, and I wore them all over the world. Everywhere I went, I was wearing those boots. And I got back to San Diego, and I was wearing them. Down in a lot of people in San Diego would go down to Mexico to have those things made. And this, in the 80s, they were charging like $300 to make boots like that down in Mexico. We got them for $42. And they were good quality boots. There was nothing wrong with these things. They knew how to make them. And anyway, I wore those things for years. I got out of the Navy, and I remember I came back, and I remember coming on leave and stuff, and I wore those boots, and I'd go out to the mall and stuff like that, and my friends would see me, and everybody was like, wow, where'd you get those boots and everything? And because they were unusual back then. Not many people had those things. And I was right proud of them. And, I wore them for a while, and then you have to take care of lizard skin and everything. They started to yellow a little bit. And it felt like to me they were shrinking a little bit. And I think that those hides may do that if you don't keep them moisturized and keep them up. And I didn't really do that like I should. And I started to later, and I think that helped them a little bit. So I got to where I didn't really wear them anymore. And a few years ago, I was offered a fair amount of money for those things. And I sold them because, they were still in pretty decent shape if they fit your feet. But anyway, I don't have them anymore. But that's a kind of a Woofer story. Me and Woofer went and got some boots in the Philippines. So I just thought I'd share that one.